Hello my pretties, I'm Chris from TechSpert, and today we're going to have a good old squint at the TCL 40 NxtPaper. It's a budget-friendly blower boasting a full-colour ePaper display, as TCL has called it. It's not exactly an e-ink display like you would find on a Kindle, but well, we'll bang on about all this in a bit. The TCL 40 NxtPaper costs just £179 here in the UK. But is it a work of genius, or is it nuttier than a squirrel's first dump of the day? Well, let's whip it out of that box, take you on a full-on tour, and for more on the latest and greatest tech, please do plug subscribe and ding that notifications bell. Cheers! Now first up quickly, sorry, I'm going to have to nerd out a bit over the box that the TCL NxtPaper comes in, because it does actually look like a book. Even opens up like a book. I've clearly gone to a bit of effort, which is especially rare to see at this sort of budget price. Anywho, stuffed inside of the book box you get one TCL 40 NxtPaper. And then if we open up the middle bit, you got yourself a USB cable and a pokey pin thingy. But as you can see, that's it, no adapter stuffed in there as well. So the TCL 40 NxtPaper, bit of a whopper at 6.78 inches, and then of course you've got to contend it with those reasonably chunky bezels surrounding that screen. And that's especially obvious when you change the default wallpaper, so you've got some proper fat lip action down below. But of course the first thing that strikes you about the TCL 40 NxtPaper's design is that crazy ePaper display. It just looks like a sticker or a painting. It doesn't look like an actual smartphone display. It's got a completely matte finish, so it doesn't reflect light. In fact, if I switch off the phone, it might be even more obvious. As you can see there, the only bit that doesn't have a matte finish is the dinky wee selfie cam up top. So certainly quite similar to a Kindle display in that regard, and it also doesn't feel like a smartphone screen. It has a more tactile finish. In fact, the front end actually feels like the back end. Anyhow, more on the display in a bit. The rest of the TCL 40 NxtPaper is constructed from plastic. You've got yourself flat plastic edges and then a plastic back end. You've got yourself a couple of different colour options to choose from. This is the midnight blue model, but you can also grab it in opalescent. Opalescent? Whatever, anyway, the midnight blue is rather fetching. The surface has a subtle glitter when it catches the light. And once again, it's a matte finish, so hopefully it shouldn't get all greasy and fingerprinty after you've been using it for a bit. And that camera bump is wedged away in the top corner there, and thankfully doesn't jut too far from the TCL 40 NxtPaper's arse. So TCL 40 NxtPaper all set up, good to go. And as you can see on the software side, you've got Android 13 with TCL's own UI launcher slapped on top. Now at first this kind of feels like stock Android. You've got your apps tray, thankfully you've got your Google Discover feed, but then drag your finger down from anywhere on screen and you pull up a news feed, just in case, you know, Google Discover wasn't enough already. Thankfully you can knock this off in the home settings, it's the control center, so just deactivate that, and now when you drag your finger down, you'll pull down the notifications bar. Now TCL has also tinkered with the vibe of this. You'll see it looks very different from your stock Android notifications. You can keep on dragging to reveal more toggles, lots and lots of toggles. And then if we yank up the old apps tray, you'll see a fair amount of crapware stuffed in here, unfortunately. Unfortunately, my old nemesis booking.com is back, but you can uninstall it with a couple of taps. Hopefully, come on, please. Yes, go away, thank you. Likes of Facebook, LinkedIn, and loads of just weird looking games. There's also an annoying hot apps folder, which can just download even more bollocks onto your phone. Thankfully, you can get rid of that too. Something I'm not entirely sure about is just how many years of OS and security updates you can expect on the TCL 40 NxtPaper, but as it's a budget blower, I'd expect probably not too many. To unlock the phone, you've got an edge-mounted fingerprint sensor, which seems to work absolutely fine. It's not the nippiest around by any means, but it seems to work first time at least. Or as an alternative to that fingerprint sensor, you've also got face unlock here on the TCL 40 NxtPaper, which again seems to be pretty nippy. Works well as long as your face is well illuminated. But what I'm very pleased to see is that TCL has stuffed 256 gigs of storage inside of this bad boy. That's double what you get on the base Google Pixel 8 and iPhone 15 Pro. And not only that, but there's space inside of that SIM tray for not just 2 SIMs, but also a micro SD memory card to further boost that storage if you need to. But anyway, now we've really got to talk about the highlights here, that 6.78 inch NxtPaper display. Now, as I mentioned back at the start of this video, this isn't like an ink display like you would get on a Kindle and other e-readers. It's a more standard smartphone screen, but TCL has constructed it differently, so it's got multiple layers stacked on top. And this gives it that delicious matte finish, so it's much easier to read this screen outdoors, despite the fact that the brightness tops off at just 450 nits. Get no pesky reflections or glares, so even in bright sunlight, everything remains clearly legible. You've also got reduced blue light output thanks to the multiple layer design, so it's easier on the old peepers, especially at 3 AM when you're wide awake and eagerly checking the latest dumbass thing that Elon Musk just said on Twitter or X or whatever the stupid thing is called this week. You've got the likes of the eye comfort mode stuffed on here, although this does give the display a rather sinister red tone. I certainly prefer the reading mode, which is pretty good if you're doing a lot of web browsing. Or alternatively, if you'd rather enjoy a more Kindle-like visual experience, well, just switch on that NxtPaper mode. Gotta love that funky transition effect. You've got a couple of options here. You can have a proper full-on authentic black and white style experience. Otherwise, if you go back into NxtPaper mode, you can change it up to color paper instead. As you can see there, you've still got no wallpaper or general theming or anything, but at least you've got a touch of color for those icons. Unfortunately, still seems to be a little bit buggy at the moment because the screen responsiveness is absolutely balked in this mode. As you can see there, the web browser just completely unresponsive. Other apps seem to work absolutely fine, but yeah, definitely still needs a bit of care and attention. I do like this mode when kicking back with a bit of manga though, just nice crispy, easy on the eye, black and white visuals. And yeah, certainly if you do a lot of reading on your smartphone, you're probably going to love this thing. But of course this mode, not exactly ideal for kicking back with some video or many other smartphone tasks, so let's get on out of it. And once again, you gotta absolutely love the tits off those transitions. And yeah, if you do enjoy kicking back with some Netflix, some YouTube, whatever, when you're on the move, well, the NxtPaper display isn't the best way to enjoy them. It is a Full HD plus resolution panel, but the visuals do look a little bit hazy, probably because of the multi-layer design here. But it's certainly not a bad viewing experience, that's for sure. The color output is actually much more punchy and poppy than I expected it to be. Viewing angles are nice and wide, and even murkier fare like Loki, for instance, you can actually watch outdoors fairly comfortably and still sort of see what's going on despite the fact that the brightness levels aren't too high. And although everything just sort of feels a little bit off when you are viewing video on this display at first, your brain just kind of adjusts to the quirkiness of it all after a while. You don't even notice. Although I did notice another wee bug here on the TCL 40 NxtPaper. If you're watching something in Disney Plus, for instance, and you swipe it away, usually appears in a little pop-up window on the desktop. However, unfortunately the pop-up window does appear, but it's completely black. The content is still plain, it's just not actually showing you anything. So yeah, there's a few wee bugs like that I would like to see ironed out of the TCL 40 NxtPaper. But overall, touch wood, the screen responsiveness seems alright. Occasionally you'll have to tap on something a couple of times for it to actually register. Oh, and you do have 90Hz refresh rate support on here as well. It doesn't actually feel that silky smooth, I've got to admit, when you're flicking through the UI and everything. It feels more like a 60Hz display, occasionally, as you can see there, quite juddery. As for the audio, well, you've got a stereo speaker setup here on the TCL 40 NxtPaper with what TCL is terming 3D boom sound. I think HTC's lawyers just shat their Y fronts. But are those speakers actually any good? Well, I'm glad you asked, let's check it out. Wear OS smartwatch taking on the likes of the Pixel Watch, the Samsung Galaxy Watch 6. I've had the Xiaomi Watch 2 Pro slapped on my arm for over a week now, so here's my full unboxing and review. And for more on the latest and greatest tech, please do plug subscribe and ding that notifications bell. Cheers! Well, with a name like Boom Sound, I was expecting an oral explosion, whereas in fact the reality is more like a wet fart, sadly. It's not as loud as I'd hoped, it's also quite tinny as well when you do jack up that volume a bit, so you might want to just stick to your headphones. But at least it's great news on that front, because as well as Bluetooth, you've also got an actual genuine headphone jack. It's also worth mentioning before I completely forget that you can grab the TCL 40 NxtPaper with an optional case with a built-in stylus. Kind of similar to what you can get for the likes of the Galaxy S23 Ultra, for instance. So if you do want to get all sketchy and scribbly on that matte display, well, apparently it gives a paper-like feel. I haven't got the stylus with me, so I can't test it out, unfortunately. As for performance, well, the TCL 40 NxtPaper is powered by Mediatek's rather basic Helio G88 chipset. I haven't seen that slapped in a budget phone for a while, I've got to admit. It's pretty basic stuff, unfortunately, so basically you don't even have 5G support on this smartphone. But TCL is releasing a 5G variant of the 40 NxtPaper, but rather confusingly this has completely different specs to this smartphone, so don't just expect a slightly faster phone with 5G built in. It is like a completely different handset. And now to properly test out the performance here on the TCL 40 NxtPaper, I'm going to get a bit of Call of Duty on the go just to see how the visuals hold up and also of course the screen responsiveness as well as that performance. Can I not get my ass handed to me by 12-year-old school kids on holiday? Let's find out. And you know what? The TCL 40 NxtPaper is absolutely fine for blazing through a bit of Call of Duty, PUBG, Free Fire, basic games like that. The graphics were scaled back to lower settings naturally, as you would expect from a basic processor, but I found that the frame rate was absolutely fine, nice and fluid throughout, no obvious judders, and that screen responsiveness was perfectly fine for a quick burst of online ultra-violence. I think I would have struggled against decent competition, but thankfully the opposition in this case was at a CAC to the point where I actually got MVP. As for the battery life, well, the actual battery packed inside of this bad boy is a smidge over 5,000 mAh, so certainly a large capacity cell. And so far, touch wood, the battery drain seems minimal. We're talking around sort of 10 to 15% an hour with general mixed use, and that's while the phone's been setting itself up and everything in the background too. So yeah, certainly should be good for all day play on a single charge. And then when it comes to recharging this bad boy, well, it's 33 watt wired charging, so not particularly tediously slow. It's pretty much what you'd expect at this sort of budget price. And last up, let's have a squint at the basic camera tech slapped here on the arse end of the TCL 40 NxtPaper. You've got a 50 meg primary sensor, but no optical image stabilization. And that's backed up by a 5 meg ultra wide angle shooter and a 2 meg macro snapper. Now the camera app is certainly quite feature packed, that's for sure, rather dense with various toggles and other bits. That layout does feel rather messy compared with what you'll get on some rivals like Motorola, but certainly if you like to play around with lots of different modes and features, you've got the likes of a dedicated Pro mode on here, so you can probably piddle about with the likes of the ISO levels, the shutter speed, the white balance and everything. You also, of course, have a portrait mode if you want to snap your subject with a lovely bit of bokeh style background action. You got a night mode for those low light shots as well, which just takes a long exposure shot, helps to brighten things up a bit. And of course a macro mode, which you can use with that 2 megapixel macro camera. But yeah, it's pretty basic optics and image processing overall here on the TCL 40 NxtPaper, unsurprisingly. Here's a few sample shots just to give you an idea of what to expect. And if you like to shoot home movies where you can record basic full HD resolution footage here on the TCL 40 NxtPaper. And then if we flip to that front facing camera, it's a 32 megapixel shooter. And I'll tell you what, it certainly can't make my haggard old mug look any fresher, that's for sure. And there you have it, you lovely buggers, you. That in a tasty wee nutshell is the fresh new TCL 40 NxtPaper, a very quirky budget blower. And I'd say certainly if you've got under £200 to spend on your next handset and you do a lot of web browsing, a lot of reading on your smartphone, you find sometimes struggling to see what's going on outdoors because of lots of glare because you live somewhere sunny, you jammy git, well, it's well worth considering. Just be aware that it is still a bit buggy in this initial state. Hopefully some of these little quirks and issues will be ironed out in updates soon. But anyway, that's what I reckon. Let me know your thoughts on the TCL 40 NxtPaper down in the comments below. Please do poke subscribe and ding that notifications bell for more on the latest and greatest tech, and have yourselves a ruddy wonderful rest of the week. Cheers everyone, love you.